Hello, everyone. This is part one of session 7 of Pre-Socratics to Augustine, also called History of Philosophy 1. We are reading Plato's Euthyphro, and we already talked about the very beginning of the dialogue. Socrates and Euthyphro run into each other in front of the courthouse. Socrates is there because of the charges brought against him, which eventually lead to his death penalty. Euthyphro is there because he intends to bring murder charges against his own father. This is a very famous case. It is perhaps the only case in ancient Athenian law where a son brings murder charges against their own father. So we will talk more next time about, the contentiousness of this case. For now, all you need to know, Euthyphro is on his way to bring murder charges against his father. The Euthyphro is one of the so-called definitional dialogues. It is a dialogue where Socrates asks what we may describe as a what is X question. A question where he wants to know what something is, and that is sometimes rephrased in terms of Socrates looking for a definition. But definition isn't really a term used in the text. More importantly, the description really is that we want to know what something is. So in the case of the dialogue Euthyphro, we want to know what is the pious. That is the question that Socrates asks Euthyphro. And Euthyphro says in response, what I'm doing now to prosecute the wrongdoer. So this response has two components. The first is that it identifies a particular action which is currently underway. What I'm doing now, namely to bring charges against my father, that's a particular action. And Euthyphro identifies that as an instance of a type of action, namely to prosecute the wrongdoer. And in response, Socrates criticizes him for as if merely giving an example. And he criticizes Euthyphro in ways that are incredibly famous because they use the vocabulary that then later becomes crucial to Plato's metaphysics. And we will kind of think about those terms as we go along and read other dialogues. So Socrates says, I didn't ask you to give me just one or two examples of the pious. What I wanted to know is what is the pious in the sense that there is something that makes all the pious actions pious. And that there is something, some form in Greek eidos, which all the pious actions share. And another Greek term that comes up, which is also like the terminological term, is ideia, often translated as idea. So the thought is there's one form, one idea, which all the instances of piety, all the particular pious actions share. And the thought is that the pious actions, the particular pious actions in the world, they are pious through the pious, where the pious is the property or that which piety really is. And by having that property, a particular action is pious. We will talk a lot more about how to spell that out and how to make sense of it. But that is the basic idea. And the Euthyphro is famous because it introduces that kind of idea. And that idea becomes, for example, spelled out in the Republic with respect to goodness, where the thought is there is the form of the good, or that which goodness really is. And anything which is good, like a good person or a good tennis player or a good toaster, they are good via the relation in which they stand to goodness. Now, the task that you have today as your kind of little homework assignment is to think more just about that because it is a complicated set of ideas. And the task is that you come up with your own what is X question. So the what is X question in the Euthyphro is what is the pious. Other examples would be what is justice, what is moderation, what is courage. The X should be something good, something that you think is good. So come up with your own example of a what is X question where X is something that you think is good. And then come up with a reply to this question, which meets two criteria. The first is what I've already explained, that your answer shouldn't just give an example. So in response to what is X, don't give an example of X, but try to come up with that which makes all the X things X. The second criterion that your answer should meet is also quite complicated. Namely, sometimes there is a kind of temptation to think that what Plato is interested in is the meaning of words, as if he was asking, what does the word pious mean? But that is not the question. The question is, what is it in the world that makes a pious action pious? So the question, what is X, is not what is the meaning of X, but rather, what is X as a thing? It is, in terms of different philosophical disciplines, you could say it is a metaphysical question. It is a question about a property called X. It is not a question about how we use the language. So the second criterion for your reply is that when you give an answer to your own what is X question, whatever it might be, try and make it an answer that isn't about how we use the words, that isn't about the meaning of the word X, but rather an answer that explains what X is,